Welcome back to the studio. I'm Guru Kathryn, and today we are talking about the slow centralization of Bitcoin and Ethereum and potentially some other cryptocurrencies out there. And I think this is a really interesting topic, and um, I can't be the only one talking about this, but if I am, spread the word. Before we dive into this today and what I'm seeing and why I think this is happening and where I think it's going. If you have any thoughts, questions, ideas, things you want me to cover, send me a text. You can text me directly at my website, KathrynColleen.com. You can also find me on all the socials, and all the links are in the show notes. So, as we get started today, if you're new here, I talk about all kinds of things. I talk about your personal and spiritual journey, which is ultimately the most important thing that you could be working on. I also talk about blockchain, crypto, counter quantum, and counter AI, and some other fun and nerdy things that I personally enjoy. If there's anything else in there you want me to talk about, let me know. So, Bitcoin and Ethereum. Bitcoin was the original decentralized, first most popular, first mover cryptocurrency. And if you haven't heard about it now, you've been hiding under a rock somewhere. And the powers that be have been through a long series of trying to stop it. And this started with, oh man, more than a decade ago, of various government agencies in the US and abroad trying to stop Bitcoin. I know it sounds like a movie script, but yeah, pretty much it was trying to make it go away. Why? Because governments cannot control it. Nobody can control it. It's fully decentralized. There's no one in charge. If there's no one in charge, then no one can control it. Right? So governments don't like that. They don't like things that they can't control. So they spent several rounds of effort trying to make it stop. Now the whole thing just runs on a distributed peer-to-peer network of individual computers all over the world. And at this point, Bitcoin has far too many to stop. And then Ethereum came along, and similar idea. It's got a little bit more of a what you might call a hierarchical control, little bit of a centralized, council and group of people making decisions. It's now proof of stake instead of proof of work. So in proof of stake, you have that the whales, the people who have the most coin or the most ether in this case, make most of the decisions. So that gives a little bit of element control, but still is so distributed worldwide that governments can't control it. So they try to kind of take that one down too. Well, and over again, they tried and it didn't work because decentralized systems and the crypto, that is one thing that you can do with decentralized systems, is not something that anybody can control. Once the cat's out of the bag, it's out there and you can't stop it. So what happened next? And this is really what I've been watching over the last couple of years. What I'm seeing, because they can't stop it and they can't control it, if you can't beat them, join them, or at least get them to join you. So what you've noticed is this very slow enticement, a bringing in of Bitcoin primarily, Ethereum secondarily, and then other cryptos to follow, I expect, bringing them into the traditional finance world. So what really got interesting was when entities like BlackRock and Fidelity, these are not decentralized entities. These are standard traditional finance, big finance, New York, big names. BlackRock is enormous. Just look them up. Look how much they control already in the world. And so when BlackRock stood up and said, we want to have a Bitcoin ETF, an exchange traded fund, and what that is, let's step into that for a minute. When you hear about Bitcoin ETFs and Ethereum ETFs and An exchange traded fund is a stock product, basically. It would be something that you could buy on a stock exchange, probably through Fidelity or through BlackRock or T. Rowe Price or whatever, your favorite stock purchasing app. So these are centralized entities putting out a securities product. And the price of the security product is based on the price of Bitcoin or the price of Ethereum, depending on which one it is, as opposed to a securities product which is based on the value of a company, right? So an exchange traded fund is just a securities product that you could buy like you would any piece of stock, except instead of being based on the value of a company somewhere, it's based on the value of Bitcoin or the value of Ethereum. And so, and I know, and if you're not getting the ick from that, you should be. I am. It's like, ooh. So Bitcoin is always worth what people decide it is, right? It's worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. It's kind of like a house. It goes up and down, and it's worth whatever somebody's willing to pay for it. You can't point to, it's harder to point to a specific underlying, there's no organization, there's no company, there's no, other than the Bitcoin transactions and the movement of Bitcoin like a digital cash, that is the activity that gives it value. The people using it, the fact that people use it and use it a lot, the fact that it's the national currency in at least one country as of this recording, really says something. But that's where it's getting its value from. And then the exchange traded fund is just a securities product controlled by a centralized entity like BlackRock or Fidelity, based on the price of that crypto. So they're not holding any of that crypto. They're just creating this other thing, which is like, the evil twin of Bitcoin or the evil twin of Ethereum, and saying, and it's going to have value just because Bitcoin has value. And it'll have value only because people will buy it, because they feel safe. They think they're safe buying stocks as opposed to actually buying crypto. And so I see them just sort of pulling into it. So that's one way to say, let's take a well-known, I was going to say the word reputable, but that doesn't actually feel quite right here. You take a well-known centralized traditional finance entity like BlackRock or Fidelity or any of the others, and you have them go in to create the thing and to get approval from places like the SEC, because the Securities Exchange Commission has to approve the offering of these kinds of securities. And so centralized traditional finance entities are much more likely to get a yes from the Securities and Exchange Commission than somebody who's a little bit more decentralized, non-traditional player like, Grayscale, who initially got a no and then had a court overturn that and say, nope, SEC had to go back and rethink it. So by having traditional finance centralized entities that are tightly ingrained with government regulators, bring the crypto into the stock market, or bring something that's so intimately tied to Bitcoin or Ethereum into the stock markets, you effectively get everyone to treat the Bitcoin and Ethereum like a stock. And you offer another place that's not the crypto, that people will put their money there instead of putting their money into the actual crypto. So this I see is the slow, and it's happening very slowly, but it's happening. The slow centralization of these cryptos that were really meant to be decentralized. And they are, and they still are, and you're not stopping them, but you're linking them so tightly with traditional centralized finance and with the government regulatory bodies that govern that, that you're almost centralizing them, aren't they? It's very, very interesting. So where does this go from here? There are so many Bitcoin ETF applications in at the SEC right now, and a couple of Ethereum ETF applications in, waiting for approval, that eventually I think that the SEC will approve one or more of them, if not all of them. I'm not that optimistic about it, but I think at least one or two. So I think we will see in the next few years at least one Bitcoin exchange traded fund and at least one Ethereum exchange traded fund. And I am not a traditional finance expert, and I am not a financial advisor, but just watching where it's going, watching the headlines, keeping track of it, that's where I think it's going. And once that is successful, then I think you'll see a proliferation of exchange traded funds for some of the other big cryptos out there. XRP is one that people bandy about, also known as Ripple. Polkadot would be another one that I would think you would eventually see an exchange traded fund for. And so you'll get this proliferation of other ones out there. While at the same time, the SEC, and to a much lesser extent the CFTC here in the United States, may continue to scrutinize. I'm trying to find a nice way to say this. May continue to scrutinize other crypto projects that have not been brought into the traditional finance fold through the vehicle of ETFs. And try to drive out some of them and try to centralize some in this way, if they cannot otherwise prevent them from existing outside of the span of government controls. So that's what I see is going on. That's what I'm calling the slow centralization of Bitcoin and Ethereum and some of the other major cryptos eventually. Now, when will that actually happen? I think the approval of exchange-traded funds by the SEC is a huge exponentiation of that action. And now when will that happen? Nobody knows. There's no time limit. There's no time limit. The SEC gets to take as long as they feel like taking. They can just sit on it forever if they want to. And maybe they will, but I don't think so. Because BlackRock and Fidelity, these are major players. These are not small-time players. These are the biggest players in the world. And I just don't see it sitting there forever. I just think that eventually the pressure and the optics of not making a decision will kind of push the SEC into having to make a decision. And their first no decision, which they put on Grayscale, which is a smaller player, they figured they can get away with it. They didn't get away with it, and it got put back on them. So that sort of toe in the water showed them, I think, that they're going to end up having to approve some somewhere. And if they approve one, they're going to have a hard time disapproving others, especially if they're nearly identical products. You're going to have a hard time not approving all the ones that are of similar ilk and with similar reporting in place and structures and safeguards and such. So I think we'll get there eventually. And there are some people who, there's some, conspiracy theories out there that, I kind of like that word, conspiracy theories. How often do they end up actually being true? So there are some theories out there that when you have a decentralized system like Bitcoin or like Ethereum or like Geode, any of the decentralized systems, Polkadot and so forth, what's to stop government entities from simply buying up enough of the coin to, especially in proof of stake systems like Ethereum, to really control enough of the decision making? And I guess the answer is not much if they did it right. because pretty much like anybody can buy Ethereum. Anybody can just go on exchanges and buy Ethereum. You know, Geode's not in that position right now. It's much harder to get. But you could see governments buying up enough Ethereum, but that's a very expensive proposition at a time when economies are kind of weak. And is that really going to be important enough for them to put that kind of money into? I don't see it, but I suppose stranger things have happened. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I doubt it. And governments are not always as organized and capable as you might think they are. And I speak from experience, having been federal government myself years ago. So that's kind of where I see it going. Let me know what questions you have, what else you would like me to kind of analyze on this front. It's very interesting stuff, isn't it? And let's see where it all goes. That being said, all of the markers for everything crypto look positive to me. Argentina just got a new pro-crypto president. That's helpful. But more so, the adoption of crypto into mainstream finance, I think, is all the signal you need to see a very bright future for all crypto out there as it comes along, especially projects like Geode, obviously, that have a true underlying value and practical utility. So, and Ethereum has some of that too. All right, so let me wrap it up there. Let me know what questions you have. Put them in the comments, text me at my website. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.